Nebraska Extension forage specialist Bruce Anderson says weather conditions can impact the quality of corn stalks and winter pastures. Nebraska experienced its 11th wettest October on record. Bruce says that wet fall, followed by winter snow coming and going, could change what livestock get out of those fields. Bruce joined us earlier this week to explain what producers need to consider when letting animals graze corn stalks or winter pastures.
Well, I think, like everybody knows, things have really been up and down so far this winter. We've had a little bit of snow here. Earlier in the season, we had some rain, lots of real cold weather, and then now we're starting to warm up some more. So it's kind of whatever you want, you're going to experience at some point, but you're going to have to go through some misery to get there.
How do those weather conditions impact the quality of corn stalks or winter pastures?
Well, when you take a look at what we're hoping to accomplish with some of those materials, they're pretty dormant, and they've got whatever nutrients they're going to have stored within them. When we start getting various weather conditions, especially wet conditions, things that can create some moisture like either rain or snow that melts, some of the nutrients that are in there that are quite soluble can actually get washed out of those corn stalks or out of the winter pasture. And as a result, those nutrients disappear, and what's left behind is often a lot less nutrition, and the animals are not going to perform as well if that's the only thing they have in their diet.
Give me an idea of what nutrients would be at risk of loss.
Okay, primarily the things that we lose are more of our soluble types of nutrients. Some of the carbohydrates, the sugars disappear very quickly. Starch is pretty soluble, and that goes pretty fast. Some of the minerals will wash out pretty quickly. Surprisingly, protein is fairly stable and stays in there, so once in a while we actually see the protein as a percent of what's remaining increasing a bit. Fiber especially goes way up as the soluble carbohydrates are washed away. So we have, a more fibrous, a coarser type of feed being available to the animals.
So if the producer thinks that they've lost some of these nutrients, do they need to supplement earlier than normal?
Well, they probably do. I think there's a whole bunch of things that they also need to be looking at. When you get these kind of weather conditions that are dry and wet and cold and warm, one of the other things that often happens, especially in the grazing situation, is that we get a lot of mud. We get a lot of tracking of dirt up there on those tissues. And so not only do we see a decline in the quality of the feed that's available, but also availability or palatability declines. And so we have both a potential intake as well as a quality of the intake type of situation going on. And if we have that happening, certainly supplementation becomes something we have to be more serious about and consider what we need to be supplementing with. Normally, protein is one of the first things we think about when we're supplementing on some of these feedstuffs. But when we're dealing with the weather type of scenarios, energy also becomes an important consideration. So looking at what kind of supplements we have, oftentimes some of the distillers and those types of supplements provide quite a bit of energy as well as protein. They can be especially effectively used in those kinds of situations, Jeff.
In which situations would mold or spoilage be a concern?
Well, we might see a little bit out on corn stalks or pasture out in the wild, but for the most part it's going to be found in bales. And one of the things that we often don't realize with baled forages is that these bales can take up moisture. They get rain on them. The cornstalk bales in particular are not usually real tightly packed, and so moisture soaks into those situations. And in those kind of conditions, we very easily can start getting some mold and spoilage developing out there that will reduce both the quality and the acceptability of that feed.
In those bales, would you recommend testing?
Well, I think we always want to be testing to know what we got there to start with. Testing doesn't do a great deal for us if we're looking at a mold type of situation, although we oftentimes can detect that we've got mold in there by pulling out samples and seeing what they're looking like, seeing some of the fungi growing on there and giving us a clue that there may be some nutritional problems with it. But the testing still will give us some good information as to what kind of supplementation might be needed in order to use that kind of feed resource effectively.
Are there any situations where the weather's severe enough that you need to think about reducing stocking rates or pulling off early?
Well, I think certainly if we start getting a lot of snow cover, or ice in particular, both of those can really restrict access to any of these feedstuffs. And when that happens, we always have to have some kind of reserve feed available. Maybe we only need to use it for a few days and we get these 40, 50 degree temperatures to melt all the problems away. But maybe it'll stay on there for a long time and we have to be using some of the conserved feeds for a longer period of time.